Living my bucolic life, free every city strife. Horses, chicks, and dogs, they are my neighbors. I cook and some spin, and move the horses into the barn. Then time to move them out again. Red barns, green pastures, beautiful white houses. The view I see each day when I arise. This life pleases me, as it is plain to see. I'm living my bucolic life.
Hello everybody, welcome back. So we're going to get started with another project, and this is going to be a 1950s retro dress. Okay, so this is the pattern here, and it looks like we've got a couple variations. This, of course, sleeveless and with sleeves. And if you look, the collar looks a little different. This one has a little bump out up here, and this one is just a straight triangle. I haven't opened it up yet, so I will. I would show you the fabric, but it is right now downstairs in the dryer drying. It is a 100% cotton, very red, Eddie Bauer cotton. So it's a loosely woven but very soft cotton, lightweight cotton. So I'll show you once it's done. But I want to get started opening up my pattern and seeing what is involved before I actually decide which variation I'm going to do. I did notice on the picture, well, here it shows on there, there is on this one here piping or something like that going around the collar, which is a nice trim choice, you know. And a lot of the 1950s dresses had a lot of really cute embellishment and stuff going on, so I'm not sure if I'm going to do that or not because the fabric I'm using is a solid, not a print. So, you know, I have that option. It's like a blank canvas that I can just start to decorate. So let me take a quick peek at the pattern and we'll take it from there. Okay, just opened it up, and what it looks like is for view B, they have detachable collar. So what I'm thinking is that this is the collar for both of them, but if you want the extra white on top of it, that's what that's going to be. And I'm wondering if this that they're showing, you know, coming out around that I thought was trim, I wonder if that's just the under collar. I'm not too sure at this point. I have plenty of other fabric I could use for a contrast collar. Actually, out of that Eddie Bauer fabric, I have red and black, so I might make a black collar maybe for the contrast. I don't know. But at this point, what I'm thinking I'm going to do is the version that has the sleeves, and they look like very straight little sleeves, so I'm probably going to have to blow those out because I got sausage arms. And so let me go ahead and get all of my pieces cut out. I'm going to cut out the detachable collar too because I'm not sure if I'm going to do that at this point or not, but if I just decide I'm going to, I'll be ready. Okay, so welcome back. It is the next day. I've got my pattern pieces cut out. I have my fabric back up from the laundry. This is it, and it is extremely soft. It's very nice. I don't know if you can see the grain, but it's a very nice woven cotton. Not too thick, but good for a dress weight. Before I really get into this though, I want to double check a lot of the sizing. And the first thing I'm going to do is take a look at the finished length. So on the back of the pattern, it says that, right up here where it says finished length from base of neck, and there's these numbers right here. Okay, so I put my little clip at that number, which is about 46 inches, and hold the end up to the base of my neck and see where that falls, because that's going to be the finished position. when I did that, I could see that I wanted it about 3 inches shorter. Okay, usually I take 4 inches off. Right now, 3 inches seem to look better for me. So I am going to be shortening my skirt pieces by 3 inches. So we have a front and back that are cut on a fold, a side front and side back. So both of these, not all, both of these, I'm just going to shorten by 3 inches along the bottom. You know, you can't go straight across because it's a slight curve. So basically, we find an end here. I will just mark up where 3 inches is, put a little mark, and just keep going all the way across. And when I get, you know, little marks all the way across, then follow that with my scissors and cut those 2 off. So I'm going to do that right now. Okay, so with the skirt taken care of, let me move some of this out of the way here. Before I get into the bodice, I'm going to deal with the sleeve, okay? So this sleeve is short. It's just a very short little sleeve right here. Very straight little sleeve. No gathers, no nothing like that. Now, I do have sausage arms, and so I want to make sure I have at least 2 inches of ease when I'm making this up. So if I take my measuring tape and I measure around my bicep, the fat part of my bicep up here, that is, oh my gosh, it's 14 inches. What have you been up to, Marie? Okay, so that means I need a finished width here of 16 inches in my sleeve. Okay, so what I'm going to do is put the end of my tape at the cutting edge of my size here, come over to the cutting edge of my size here, which is just over 16 inches. It's like 16 1/8, okay? Which sounds great, but that has the seam allowance built into it. So I need to take 1 1/4 inches out of that for seam allowance, which puts me right here at 14 7/8. So I need to add just over 1 inch. And on this pattern, I think that just spreading it is going to be the way to go for me. So if I lay this down so you can kind of see the grid of my table behind here. You know what, let me scoot you down. Okay, that's a little bit closer here. So the first thing I'm actually going to do is go ahead and cut the outside line out of my size. As far as figuring out what size to cut out, if you are new to sewing, I would suggest you don't do this pattern first. You would want to start with a pattern with a lot more ease built into it first, and select a size, and then from that one you can determine, you know, if you need more or less ease and things like that. And ease is just the difference between what your actual body size is and what the amount of space in the garment. So say you have a waist of 30 inches and the garment has 31-inch waist, you only have 1 inch of ease, which is pretty snug, which is actually what this pattern has. It only has 1 inch of ease here at the waist. It calls for more ease up here at the bust, but we'll deal with that in a moment. So with this, what I'm going to do, I'm laying this so that my arrow is on the straight of grain with my grid behind it. This dot here is the center, and I'm just going to draw a line along that straight of grain down here. And I can spread it out 1 inch right there and just kind of blend the bottom, and that might be easiest, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. So let me go ahead and cut up to the dot for my size, okay? And then I'm going to come back on this side and cut almost up to it. So I have just a little piece of paper holding it together there, okay? Now, I need to add about an inch. Actually, it was like 1 1/8 inches. So what I'm doing here is I'm laying this right here where I sliced it open along the grid line so I can see exactly where everything is starting out. And I'm going to get a piece of tissue paper from my pattern scraps down here. Cut this printing off so it's not distracting. Okay. So I'm going to put my scissors there to hold that side down. I'm going to move this side out until I have about 5/8 of an inch here. Might be slightly more. That's okay. And then on this side, because I have a starting point where this line is, I can move it out also about the same. And that way it's spread out pretty evenly. Then get my little scrap of paper in here, sliding it underneath there, making sure it still looks about the same here. And actually, before I tape this, I want to measure it one more time just to make sure I have the right width. So cutting straight across, that puts it at 17.5. Once I cut the seam allowance out, 16.25. That is perfect. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and tape it up here. And tape this down here, okay? And then my new sleeve piece, everything up here is going to fit the same. It's just going to be a little bit wider at the bicep area, which is definitely what I need. Okay, alrighty, let me grab that front bodice piece. Okay, so looking at my bodice pieces, in general, at the shoulder and everything right here, a 16 fits me well. And I have the 16 on top here, and I have the 18 on the bottom. And just out of curiosity, I am lining up, starting right here where this little V is, where the back collar is going to come together, just to see how much of a difference it is. It looks like my collar is about 1/8 of an inch deeper, which is not a big deal. And it looks like my shoulder, at the shoulder here, if you can see through, it's a little less than 1/8 of an inch deeper there for the 18. Personally, I don't think 1/8 of an inch on my shoulder and 1/8 of an inch on my collar is going to make or break things. And as far as fitting my body, because there is so little ease built into the waist here, and honestly, I've been eating a lot more than I should lately. Right here, it will have numbers, okay? So this is for size 16. The first one is the size. And then 31.5 is the finished garment waistline. And then it has it in centimeters, 80 centimeters. Okay, so this is for, size 16 is made for a body size with a 30-inch waist. That's not going to be happening. But the bust would, I could make the bust work, but it says that they want to have total ease at the bust of 4 inches, okay? And so this is their finished garment measurements, and the finished garment measurement is 42. So you would need a 38-inch bust to have 4 inches of ease to match what the design is calling for. So with all of that being said, I am going to move that aside and use the size 18. It's just going to fit everything a lot better. But I just wanted to show you to make sure that you keep an eye on all of that stuff. I am trying to decide how I'm going to make modifications, because on this pattern we do have 2 darts coming together to point at an apex that should be right around here, and mine is lower. Now this is a retro pattern, and I was about to start doing this my old way, And I decided, you know what, I want to do it the retro way that they might have taught to do with this style. So I got my old Bishop book out. Love this book. I don't even remember what year it's from. 1966 it says. But what I wanted to show you is the way that they're showing to tackle a large or low bust. Okay, and that's what I'm going to be dealing with, is a low bust adjustment. And actually what they're saying to do, it makes some sense. And it's going to be pretty easy to deal with. Hello there. So this is, hindsight editing Marie here. And I'm watching this video, and I need to let you know at this point, I did make modifications to my front bodice piece similar to what you just saw on that diagram from the Bishop sewing book. But I'm not going to show you all of that because it ended up distorting this particular design, and I ended up having to remove the extra length I added on. It ended up being a little too blousy because of the extra width that was added on. So if I had just gone with that size 18 as is, it would have ended up probably fitting me better. So I'm not going to show you all of that because that it will cause more confusion than it'll be worth. I have another video, and I will link it in the description, showing just lowering bust adjustment, so that if you have questions on that, that's where you can go just for some general information on that. But basically, I'm going to be skipping everything that I did to modify my pattern, because it ended up not working for this design, and my fabric became very finicky, as you will see. So if you see later on that my pattern doesn't look exactly like yours might, just ignore that. The construction's going to be the same, and it's all going to work out. Okay. The last thing I want to show you is this piece. It is the detachable collar. And I am thinking I'm not going to do a detachable collar. I think that it will start to annoy me when it comes time to do laundry and things like that. So I am just going to make my permanent collar shaped like this. They give you that option, it's going to be right here. It's just not going to have the additional second layer on top of it, okay? But I'm just thinking that this is going to start to annoy me pretty darn quick. I'm going to keep this out because you never know. Tomorrow morning I may get a burst of enthusiasm and decide to do it. And because it's detachable, I can do that at the last minute. So putting it aside but not forgetting it, I'm going to go ahead and get all of my pieces cut out of my fabric, and I'll be back later. One thing I wanted to point out while I'm getting everything organized to cut fabric right now is this would be an excellent design to do a mock-up in with a less expensive fabric or something like that. And of course, if I was a smart woman, I would do that. But apparently I am not. And yes, this is fabulous Eddie Bauer fabric, but I did get it on the clearance rack, 70-something% off, so I paid $3 a yard for it. I'm not going to have a seizure cutting into it. And all of my big adjustments is right here, but because it's a dart, if I needed to, I can adjust that and ease things. So to me, I just want to go ahead and get it cut out. But is it a smart idea to make a mock-up of this dress, especially the bodice area? Absolutely. So I encourage it, but I am not going to do it. Anyway, let me go ahead and get this cut out. All right, I'm over here at my ironing board with a scrap because I want to play with fusible tape. And the one I think I'm going to be using on this project is this. This is Fusible 1-inch tricot, okay? Very lightweight, doesn't add any bulk, but once you iron it on, it's gonna keep things where they need to be. And so what I'm gonna do is just line up the edge of my tricot tape with my cut edge of my pattern, so that when I'm stitching, my stitching line's pretty much gonna go down the center. since it doesn't add any bulk, you know, it's going to be nice on the outside. But this is acting like rayon. And I'm pretty sure it was supposed to be 100% cotton when I was looking at the bolt. I ought to look that up. But it's acting like a finicky rayon, okay? So just to give you that idea. So this is pretty much what I would do if I had a rayon also. So let me go ahead and get my piece over here. This is my bodice, and first I ironed it, and I want to make sure I have two opposite sides when I'm done, so paying attention to that. So on the pattern where they have stay stitching, I'm going to have my stay tape. It's hard to get everything in frame here. So first of all, I'm going to put it up here along this top edge and just start putting it down. Getting up here to the corner, I'm going to slightly miter it. I will overlap that, but slightly miter it up here. Okay, and then they want this V here to also be reinforced, and we are going to be clipping that out, so it's like a belt and suspenders kind of thing. I'm going to be using tape and stay stitching in this corner, just, you know, because I can. So since that part is already mitered, I'm going to put it here. And come back over here. And I know this is like overkill. Let me go ahead and turn the camera off. I'll just show you what it looks like when I'm done. Turned it on one more time because we have this curve here because they want you to stay stitched to around that curve, and this is straight. I am just kind of turning it as I go. I'm not pulling it. I'm just kind of looping it around as I go, infusing it on that way. If you stretch it to curve, it's going to want to shrink up on you. So if I end up, and I didn't because it's a nice gentle curve, but if I did that and I ended up with a tiny little fold here, that wouldn't bother me because that would be pretty much in the seam allowance anyway. And it's the fusibleness of all of this that's going to make my life easier. So get this one up here on the top and then do the other bodice piece in exactly the same way. And see how the iron is leaving that imprint? When it cools down, that's going to disappear, but that's making me think that there's some rayon in here. I really need to look that up. Not that it's going to change anything the way I'm doing it, but anyway, out here on the outside, I hope you can see it's not adding any weight. You know, it's still nice and soft, but like on this part here that is on a bias, I do have a little support. So that's why I'm using my tape. Okay, so now that that is done, I am going to stay stitch these, but before I do, I'm going to lay them next to each other and make sure I have two opposite sides, and I do. So that's important because, you know, that's a pain when you have to redo it. I'm going to stay stitch here, which is running a row of straight stitching at a 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way up this V. I'm going to go over one stitch and then come down this V. When you're going to clip up to something, I find it a lot easier when you have one stitch to go over. So instead of just going junk, junk, I'm going to go over one stitch and then back down. Okay, so I'm going to do that to both of my bodice pieces. Over here, I wanted to show you my sweet Pearl wanted to come out and play today. I could almost hear her yelling, pick me, pick me. So I'm getting a bobbin threaded up. She uses a class 15 bobbin. But I showed this to you guys when I first bought it. I love this thing. I think I have a link in my Amazon links for it. But basically, when you're using a spool that has these cross threaded, you know, if you can see them going like that on the spool, it's better if they're coming off this direction, in my opinion, instead of upright. And this makes it really easy, so just thought I would mention that. It just slides over a spool pin and you tighten it up. So I'm going to go ahead and get her bobbin loaded and get those stay stitches put in. Okay, I did one side and I want to show you, this is my stay stitching, and I just cut the tip off of that Fusible stuff. It's not really necessary. This is the critical part. But if you can see how I have a stitch that goes over and then up. And that's far in where you can't actually see the little guides on your sewing machine plate. So what I do, and I suggest, is, oops, I need to go out to the barn. What I suggest is that you get a ruler and something that will show up. I'm using my white heat erasable pen, which will, as it dries, show up better. And draw that line. This is supposed to be at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So if I put my ruler so it's slightly less, it's like a fat 3/8 where I have my ruler placed, by the time I draw my line, it's going to be accurate. So that way I have a guideline. This will appear as it dries here that I can follow. Once I have that done, then I came back and serged around the edge. Okay, and this is a very crazy shaped piece, so you're going to have to be careful. I've shown how I serge around corners several times. I might do that later on, but I need to run out to the barn real quick. If you've been watching, you know we have 3 horses. My oldest one, he's going on 30 and he has lost all of his teeth. So this is like TMI time here, but I have to soak his senior feed in the morning to make it soft, take it out, put it in the barn so that him and only him will eat his senior feed. But I have to bring the other 2 horses in too and put them in their stalls and give them their feed because nobody likes to eat alone and all of that kind of stuff. So anyway, long story short, I need to run out to the barn and let them out. But when I come back, I'm going to stay stitch this and serge around this piece. After I serge it, then I'm going to iron it, just because sometimes when you're serging around corners and things, it's going to want to curl up just a bit. Okay, so ironing it after that will be good, because then I'm going to come back and mark where all of my darts are. Okay, so with that done, there is a lot of stuff to mark on here. So I've got my thick leather coaster, and I'm just going to start punching out circles. So up here is a little, it's like a dart with 2 sides on it. So I need to punch out all 4 of those little holes. And then there is the dart down here. Okay, I need to go ahead and get my darts all put on here. And what I'm going to be doing, you know, I have them all punched out, all of my circles punched out here. This top one, this dart top needs to match up with the point of your stay stitching. And this is a troublesome fabric, hence all of this. So it's kind of like a badly behaving rayon, in my opinion. So the fabric itself is not square anymore. If I match up this top dot here with this, and I'm just going to stick a pin in here to hold that together. If I rotate this to try to match it up, you'll see, oh my gosh, it's sticking out too far over there, and it's not enough over here and everything. It's going to be okay. It's going to even out. Just do the best you can to come up with something very, very close. The first thing though is that I need to make sure I put my top dot where that V of stay stitching is, okay? And with that there, I'm going to go ahead, draw the bottom and the sides. Okay, so I have my dots there, and then I am going to draw the connecting lines because that makes my life easier. And I'm just drawing straight lines. When I'm actually sewing it, it'll be more curve right there, but this way I can see clearly what is going on. I don't know why this one didn't show up. Okay, so just like that. So I'm going to go ahead and draw my other darts in on the side here and the bottom one. So I need to get these pinned up. And again, I drew these on the wrong side of my fabric. So I'm sticking my little pin down in the first hole of my larger size and then coming back up in the hole for my larger size. And going to pinch it up here at the top. This very drapey fabric. I was thinking this was going to be such an easy project. For some reason, I just did not look closely enough at this fabric, I guess. Anyway, I got a pin up here at the very top to lock that in, snugging this down, and I'm going to put one in the middle. And when I'm sewing my darts, I'm going to start from the outside edge and come all the way up. Because this fabric is what it is, I'm going to go straight off the edge and then hand tie my knot up here because I don't want it to skew while I'm backing up here, okay? So I'm going to do the same thing for down here, making this dart the same way as I did with that one. Up here, it's a little bit different because it's just a two-pointed dart. I'm going to put a pin down in one side of the center, back up in the other side of the center, push that together, pinch this outer edge, this outer point right here. So I have that going for me. Gives me my crease line, lock this in, and come over here and pinch it at that corner where my stay stitching is, okay? And put a pin right there. All right, so let me get that bottom dart put in and I sew it. Now on this one, what I'm going to do is start up here and then come down and up and again come off the edge here and just hand tie that and those tails, my thread tails. Okay, I'm going to be pressing these darts now and I'm using the curved part of my ironing board here to lay this. That's going to help it be nice and smooth. And the side dart gets pressed downwards. Okay, so that is the side dart. The bottom dart, again, lining it up on my little ironing board curve here. It is going towards the center. So this is the outside, this is the center here. I believe that is what they want. Yes. Okay, so that is going towards the center. And then this little guy up here, okay, it's creating like a little concave, I guess it is. I always get those confused. But I'm pushing it towards the pointy part, okay, towards the center front. Is another way of putting it. So just pushing that over like so. Now I'm going to flip it over and double check that things look okay from the outside. And I think that they do. I think everything is just fine. So let me go ahead and get the other side done. Okay, so I've got this side sewn, but I wanted to show you what I mean by tying off my knots. So I have my threads here, and I'm just gonna make a big loopy knot. And while I have that loop, I get a straight pin and stick it through there, and also stick the pin through the very tip of my dart right there. So then when I pull the thread, it's going to travel all the way down to where it needs to be, right there at the very end. And then I'm going to cut, leaving about a 3/8 inch tail, okay? I know it's red on red, but hopefully you might be able to see. Okay, so that's how I tie off my threads. Good morning. It's actually been a couple days. I have lots of things I was taking care of. So I'm ready to jump back into this. So the next thing we're going to be sewing is the back piece. But I wanted to tell you my plan. Since I am not at this point doing the over collar, but I kind of want this look where there's a bit of edge to that, I am going to be putting this trim in the seam between where the outer collar and the inner collar, this whole side edge is going to be. So with this scrap, I want to show you, it's going to end up looking kind of like that at the edge. And I think that that's going to be pretty cool. The toughest part with this is making sure you get it sewn in so that none of that white shows. And that is tricky, let me tell you what. We will get to that shortly. The next thing I actually need to do is get my back bodice piece out. So this is the piece, one cut on a fold. There is a dart up here at the shoulder, a dart at the bottom, a dot for sleeve placement. And because, you know, it calls for it in the pattern stay stitching, but because this pattern is what it is, I'm going to use that fusible tricot tape up here in place of stay stitching, just for me. And I think I'm going to do that first before I get my darts marked in, because I mark them with a heat erasable pen, and as soon as I iron it, I'm afraid that it'll erase that. So you've seen me fuse that stuff on before. I'm going to go ahead and grab it, fuse that on, and serge all the way around the edge, and then I'll be back. Actually, I changed my mind. I'm going to use this tape, and I cannot give you a link to it. I bought it on an Etsy shop a while back, and I don't remember the name. There's a rubber stamp on here. But basically what it is, it's a bias cut tape, okay? It is fusible, but sewn onto that bias cut tape is a little bit of a stay tape. And so the stay tape is cut on grain, so like a twill tape, so it won't stretch, but the bias will. And because this is kind of a lot of curve and I don't want to work so many little wrinkles in, I am going to be fusing this on because I can place it about a 1/4 inch from the edge, and this bias cut of this edging is just going to flex nicely. So using this, if I can find this, I will definitely add it to my links, but it was just a random Etsy seller and I'm not too sure exactly if they're still in business. Alright, so I've got that part done, and I am marking my darts on the wrong side of my fabric. So just like before, I punched out the little circles that go with my size. Draw those in, and then with my ruler, connect the dots so I have a nice visible stitching line. So there's that leg, there's a dart up here. I need to do that on that side also. Okay, so it's been a few days since I've been up here, and at one point my room was a disaster, so I took my trash out and burned it. We live in the country, we burn our paper trash. And I think I burned one of my pattern pieces, and I don't remember cutting it out, and I was looking around for it and I can't find it, and that is my front facing piece, which is very important. And so looking at this diagram here, that's my front facing piece. And it's basically the outside edge of my front bodice piece. So I'm going to finish working on this back, and then I'm going to reconstruct a front facing piece using my front bodice piece. It's not going to be the end of the world, but I'm just kind of frustrated that it disappeared on me. So anyhow, just a preview of coming attractions there. I've got my darts marked up here, and get the thread out of the way. I'm going to do these darts just like normal, where I put a pin down one dot at the bottom of the leg and up the other one. Push that pin together, pinch it up here at the very top, okay, and get that nice crease laid. Put a pin up here at that top dot, and I'm going to put one about midway. Yep, that's still right. And down here, and I'm going to do that for all my darts, and again start sewing from the outside edge, come all the way off the edge, and just hand tie that knot up there. Okay, so I've got my darts put in. I've got them pressed towards the center on both the top and the bottom down here, and my little loose tails tied off. So what we're going to do right now is sew the fronts to the backs at the shoulders only. We're not worrying about the neck in this first step. This point right here where everything comes together. All right, that is where I need to stop sewing, I believe. Let me look at their diagram because I hope that's what they're saying. Yes, it is. All right. All right, so since I'm going to be looking at this side when I'm sewing, what I want to do is make sure that while I'm pinning it, I have it lined up well. So first I'm just going to match this outside, this is where the sleeve goes, this corner. Okay, so that everything up here is flush. Then I'm going to stick a pin. And remember, this is where we have that stay stitching line. Let me try to brighten that up. Okay, so hopefully that's better. So here's this stay stitching line here, okay? And this is the top of that shoulder dart, and it all comes together at this one point. I'm going to stick a pin right in the middle of that point, and that needs to go down. Oh, I did not mark it. There is a point right here, and it's 5/8 of an inch in from each side, but I'm just going to go ahead and punch it out real quick so that we can just use their marking, okay? So it's this little dot here. This is my back bodice piece. That's the dot that we're going to match to. So let me just place my pattern piece there and draw my little dot. And I'm drawing it on the right side of my back piece. So whereas all my other dots I drew on the back side, this one I'm drawing on the right side just so I can see it. Okay, back to where I was. You can kind of see right on the right side where all of these things are pointing together, okay? At this point where everything is coming together, I'm sticking my pin up. And then it's going to go back down at that dot I just drew, okay? And that's important because we're not going to be able to see what I'm doing back there. So I want to make sure I have it lined up well right now. All right, so that is in place. And then I'm going to just kind of ease all of this together up here at the top. And I want to make sure when I pin this that I'm pinning my shoulder dart from my back going the right direction. So now when I sew this, and what I do on this side, I'll do the same over here just from the opposite direction. I need to sew this at 5/8 of an inch from the complete outside edge all the way up to this point, the point where I stuck that pin down, okay? So from there to there at 5/8 of an inch. And I'm going to do the same thing over here with the other front bodice piece. Now one other thing I want to show you, when I'm pinning this side together, this stuff, you know, I told you it's kind of like a rayon that does not want to behave. It's very loosely woven. And because I have stay tape on my front shoulder, but not on my back, the back, you know, stretched out a bit. So I'm going to ease it together, but what I want to show you, because I haven't done this in a while, is you take the shorter side. See how this side is longer, this side is shorter, and I'm bending the shorter side on the inside, the longer one is on the outside, and I'm just kind of curving it together, all right? And that's going to help it all fall together. Oh, better light there, in a more natural position. So while I still have it curved, I'm going to start pinning, starting with where this little dart is there, and over here, okay? So now if I open it up flat, it's going to want to lay a lot better. And I still need to get this side over here pinned correctly, and double check your position over here, because it would be a pain to do all the work to get it sewn in and then have that position wrong. So I'm pretty sure that I am good to go. Just easing and pushing and smushing. Sometimes you can just, if it's a loosely woven fabric like this, sometimes you can just kind of smush it together. Okay, there you go. I wanted to tell you, after all that talking, when I got done, I was off by about 1/8 of an inch. So what I did is I just pulled out my stitching to just be on this pleat, and I'm repinning it, and I'm going to stitch it again. But one thing else I wanted to say that will make it easier if you have to do any easing is make sure, if you can, that the bigger part is face down towards the feed dogs as you're sewing, and then that way, as you hold the top a little bit tighter, the feed dogs will just work in all that extra for you, and that'll make it easier. So anyhow, let me go fix my little mess. I just picked out that much, stitching it again, and I'll be right back. Okay, so this is what I have so far. There's my stitching on the outside. On the right side, it looks like this, okay? From this point, it's open. What I'm going to go do is press the seam allowances open that we just did, like that on each shoulder. Okay, so those are pressed open, and if you can see right here is my stay stitching from when I stay stitched that angle there. That's why I stay stitch at 1/2 inch, but my sewing line is at 5/8, because that way all of that is just slightly hidden in here on the inside and not visible out here. Okay, let's start dealing with this part that's going to go basically the back collar piece. Actually, I just looked, and I think I was supposed to sew these two pieces together before, but it doesn't hurt anything to do it now, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. This is the back piece, like this area here on your pattern, okay? Sewing those right side together, and that would also be at 5/8 of an inch. And then once I have that stitch, press this seam allowance open. Okay, so I'm going to pin these together now, and I should have marked my center back of my back before, but I did not, so I'm just folding it in half right here. That pin is my center back, okay? So laying that down, I'm going to match up this seam that I just did with that center back and get that pinned in place. Okay, I need to trim this. I should have trimmed it earlier, but again, no harm coming now. This is where I did that stay stitching, and I am trimming up to, but not through. I'm stopping actually about 1/16 of an inch away from the corner of that angle that I did, so that this can flex open. So let me go ahead and do that over here on this side also. There it is. And I'm just coming in from out here. There you go. Okay. There's a chance that you're going to need to clip your neck edge if it's not going to match up well. Mine looks like it's doing pretty good. At the stitching line, it needs to be flat so you can sew it. Let me get a pin right here. All right. So this is that funky angled one that we did before. I'm going to be picking up my stitching again at that same intersection where everything is coming together from here at 5/8 of an inch all the way from here to this side over here. And you should have a stay stitch line that you can use kind of as a stitching guide. So I'm gonna, this is at 1/2 inch, and my stitching line is going to be like right here. But I'm going to go all the way from this dot to this dot right there. And if your fabric is not opening up well, you can come in and just make some little clips up here at the top. I would not go too deep, but that might make it so that it'll lay flatter so that you can sew it easier. Okay, so I've got that done. I want to show you, this is the right side. So this is my shoulder, okay? This is the back, that's the front. From the front, you have all of this stuff coming together right here. This is that dart, okay? This is that shoulder seam. This is the seam we just did, coming around here. And then it all intersects back here again at this shoulder, okay? It's a little lumpy. I still need to press it. in the inside, what you're going to do is take all of this and press it up towards this area up here. It's going to be kind of hidden underneath that collar when we're all done. I'm not sure why it looks that way. On the right side it looks good, so I think that I pressed this a little bit off center. I think that's why that looks a little bit wonky. But, you know, it's fine on this side, it's fine on this side, so I'm going to call that good. So let me get that pressed up, and then I'm going to set this aside because I need to deal with making that other facing piece. Okay, so let me tell you the way that I'm going to be doing this. First of all, don't lose your facing piece, and you won't have to, but if you did, what I do is I look at the diagrams and hope that they are right, and usually they are. And on this diagram, this is the facing piece I'm going to recreate, okay? I can see that I have this stay stitching mark here, and then maybe an inch beyond that, okay? So if I look on my pattern, here's the end of that stay stitching mark. If I give myself about an inch beyond that, that would be right about there, okay? Then on the bottom, I see here is a notch right there, and it's maybe about the same distance. Here is there, maybe, you know. I don't want to get into where the dart is, but I want a wide enough facing I can get all my buttonholes and everything in. So if this is my notch, I'm going to come over about an inch from there and draw a line, okay? And then from here, it's just a matter of connecting these two. So if I was just to draw a straight line, you know what, I am going to draw a straight line and just go like that, okay? So then I'll have this piece. Theirs looks slightly curved, not dramatically, but just maybe slightly curved. I don't know that I'm going to worry about that because my fabric is such a pain in the neck to deal with. And yes, I am cutting this piece. I doubt I'm going to make this dress again. Just letting you know, this is probably a one and done kind of thing. So I am just going to cut it. But I am saving both sides. And if I ever want to do it again, all I have to do is tape this back together. So, you know, no worries there. So I'm just going to set this aside for a minute, keep it, use this as my bodice piece. Now, this has a dart. The bodice facing piece does not have a dart. I'm not going to worry about this dart. I'm going to skip everything about this dart and just let it lay flat right there. That's not going to bother me at all because it's short enough. It's just going to be tucked inside. So that's my new bodice facing piece, and I'm going to cut 2 of these out of my red fabric. Or if you wanted a contrasting collar, cut this out of that contrasting color. Now that's an idea. I'm going to go downstairs and have a cup of coffee and think about it, because if I really wanted to have this look, I could just make this out of white or black or whatever and get that look. So let me think about that for a minute and I'll be back. Okay, so here is what I decided. I have this black that is actually the same brand of fabric. I just got it in 2 different colors, a red and a black. These are going to be black. So I got it cut out. I need to put interfacing on both of these pieces. So I'll go over there to my ironing board and do that. And I am doing my very typical, very usual, extremely lightweight interfacing. Okay, so let me go ahead and get that fused on the wrong side of both of these pieces, and then I'll be back. Okay, so I've got it fused on here, and I want to show you something. The fabric kind of stretched a little bit while I was ironing it and ironed the interfacing to it. And so what I'm doing is I am laying my pattern piece back on top of my pieces. They're both stacked up here that have already had the interfacing fused to them. Lining up all of this part up here because that is the more complicated part. Make sure all this is correct. And so you can see how much extra there is here. So now I'm going to come back and retrim around these cut lines. And part of me is not sure about a lot of this because the red fabric is the same type and it probably stretched a little bit too. But I think that my best bet for making this come together well is to get this as close as I can to the original pattern piece, and then when I'm combining them, if I need to make some adjustments, then, well, I'll just deal with it at that point. The first thing I'm going to do is match up and sew together this back portion, this back of the collar here, sewing that at 5/8 of an inch, and then pressing that seam allowance open. Okay, so now that that is done, what I'm going to also need to do is, just like on the front, do stay stitching around this angle, but instead of just going like that and like that, I'm going to go the entire distance. So at a 1/2 inch seam allowance up here, all the way over, and then down. And just to make my life a little bit easier, I'm going to flip this over so I can draw it on the interface side here. But I'm going to go ahead and make those lines where I can see them. So add a 1/2 inch seam allowance there, and 1/2 inch seam allowance here so I can see clearly where this point is supposed to be. And the same over here and here. Okay, so let me go ahead and get that stay stitching put in. Okay, so now that that is done, just like on the front, I'm going to go ahead and clip up to within 1/8 of an inch of that corner. I don't want to get super close to the threads. Okay, so I'm close, but I'm not all the way through. So I'm going to go ahead and do that to both sides here. Okay, you can see, that way I'm safely on the inside. The next thing I need to do is finish off this long edge on both sides, this one here. And what they want you to do is turn it towards the inside. Oh, do they give us a measurement? They do not. They don't say exactly how much to turn it in, and honestly, we drafted our own pattern anyway, so I'm going to say, you know, about a 1/4 inch, turning it under and then running a straight stitch over that just to lock it in nicely. I still have my red thread over on my machine. I think that's fine. Okay, so I've got that part done. The next thing to do is turn these down where we stay stitched it. Press those down and do a little edge stitch along here and along here also, okay, to hold those down like that. Okay, so I got that done, and I wanted to show you that's it on the underside. This is it on the outer side. So yes, you can see my threads, but this is going to be inside the garment, tucked away in a hidden space where it will never be seen, and I just didn't feel like switching my threads back and forth. So there you go. The next thing I need to do is turning it this way. From where this stay stitch line is, I need to fold it and press all of that up like this. Just pressing it, not stitching it. So since I'm doing 2 different colors now, I am going to actually skip the whole trim work, because I think that that's overkill at this point. So we will use that and all of that technique another time. For right now, I just want to get this laid out. So this is the right side of my back. This is one of the front pieces here and one of the front pieces here. Okay, I need to get this matched up. So I'm putting the right sides down of this. And we're going to be sewing this outside edge up here. So I'm actually going to get started pinning the center back portion of it together. I'm going to put a pin on either side so that I can hold those seam allowances down where they're supposed to be. And There actually were notches on here, and I did not put those on. I should have, but I am just... This fabric, you know, it wants to move around, and I think I got distracted with that, but that's okay. All right, so I have a pin here in this corner and one here. And what I do to this side, I'll do the same to this side, okay? So with that pinned, it looks like, because I have stay tape over here, this is actually going to behave pretty well. And I should be able to just pin these two together, hopefully. Hopefully. If one side seems like it's a little tighter than the other side, I'll ease it in, just like I did before, where I kind of curve it around and pin it, and then if there is any extra, let the feed dogs work that in. So, but no, this is fitting really nicely. Very happy about that. Okay, one more pin here, and then I'm going to go down to the bottom here. And there was not stay tape along this side, so if I have issues, this is where it might be. But actually, I do have stay tape all the way around that curve, so no, I'm going to be fine. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and get this pinned on. 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, starting on one side down here, going up, pivot at the corners, all the way around, and ending up on this side, way over here. And I'll be right back. Okay, so when I'm going to go sew this, the technique that is the proper technique, which they recommend, and for this dress I recommend it too, where you start in the center and come out and do this side, okay? So I'll be looking at it this way, do that one. And then start at the center and go the other way. So when I go the other way, I'm going to have to look at it this way, just, you know, because of logistics on the sewing machine. But starting here and working out, you'll get a more even look to it that way. Okay, so I've got that done. Now let's have some clipping time here. So where this curve is here, I'm going to make a few little clips. I'm stopping about 1/8 of an inch away from my sewing line there. Coming up to this corner, I'm taking bulk out of it. Again, leaving about 1/8 of an inch in that corner. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. We are going to be doing some understitching in selected areas. I am debating on pinking this. Let me see how thick it is when I just turn it. That's going to be my deciding factor here. All right, can you tell, because I can tell, where exactly that seam allowance ends? It's kind of a big chunk right there, all right? Because of that, I am going to pink it. Pinking it, it's magical, it's mystical. It makes it so that you can't really tell where that edge is. So as you can see, I'm not trimming super close to my sewing line. I'm keeping it, you know, about a little more than half of my seam allowance there. But if I turn this now, you don't see that chunk. Even when I press down on it, you don't see it because it's zigzaggy, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and, you know, do these same clips here and here on the other side, but then go ahead and pink the whole thing just like I did right here. I also wanted to show you up here in the back collar, I am just going to actually trim out. These scissors are too sharp right there. Hang on a sec. Trim out a lot of that seam allowance all together, okay, like that. And that is on the interfaced side, and also over here on this side, because you can see there's a lot of bulk right there, and I just don't want that in the back of my neck. Okay. There you go. So now that that is clipped out, I'm just going to continue pinking across here. Okay, so the understitching on this is going to be a little bit tricky because we're doing different sides at different times. So if I'm just going to quickly turn this whole thing right side out. I obviously haven't pressed it yet. Obviously. The first part we're going to do is down here. It says up to curve, I believe. Yes, we're supposed to stop before it starts this curve right here. So I'd say probably right about here to the bottom, okay? Now, this first bit of understitching, let me just put a little pin right here so I can keep track of where that spot is. This first bit of understitching, I think I'm going to press this actually before I stitch it, but we're going to be putting the seam allowances towards the facing, towards this way, okay? So if you look underneath, I'm going to be pressing these seam allowances this way, okay? And then on the outside here, on the facing side for this beginning part, we're going to be doing a row of straight stitching right about there. I usually do somewhere between 1/16 of an inch or so from here, okay? From this point all the way down on the facing with the seam allowances underneath it. I'm going to do that on both sides. Okay, so that is done. There is my understitching right there, okay? So you have to kind of think through what this is going to look like. This is, you know, one of the front pieces. From this point down, I want the red to look really nice, okay? So that's why we understitch the facing, because that kind of gives it a nice edge and curves the red towards the underneath side, okay? Now, up here, this is going to be my collar. Where I'm looking at the collar, I don't want to see the red. So that's why we're going to now understitch towards this side instead of towards this side. And there's two different steps. So on the instructions, if you are following along, we are down here at section number, or step number 11. So this is the understitching here that we just did onto the facing side. So that's why they're showing it here. This little bit here, that bit there, and this bit are shown over here because these are the ones that are going to be done while you're looking at the right side of your fabric. So we're just going to do them one at a time because that makes the most sense to me. And this one actually, this is that collar shape that has the stagger. I'm not doing that collar shape. I am doing the other collar shape, which basically means instead of a short one here and this is just going to go all the way around, okay? So, looking at, let's start over on this lapel over here. I'm not going to be able to get my presser foot into that corner. It's just not going to happen when I'm opening this up flat to put onto my sewing machine. I'll probably have to start right about here because I'm thinking that that's where it'll fit comfortably. And I'm going to push the seam allowances underneath here towards the red side, towards the garment side, okay? So pushing them underneath this side, starting where I can, I'm going to put my stay stitching over here, okay? So starting here, same, just about 1/16 of an inch in, all the way down until I can't go any further, which is probably going to be to right about here, you know, probably an inch or so from this corner. Okay, so there's my stay stitching now, okay, on the red part. So I'm going to go ahead and get these corners, got my little knitting needle here, try to poke out these corners a little bit more and just press this whole top edge of this collar before I get to the last one. Okay, so now when I'm pressing this top part of the collar, I want to do it while I'm looking at the blue side. because that's going to be the visible side before. So I'm just kind of rolling it with my hand to make sure that that understitching is placed where it needs to be. Looks like it's doing its job really well. And come over here. Steam is hot, don't you know? All right, and coming up to this corner right here. So the key thing here is that I don't want to see the red when I'm pressing this. But if I don't see it here, if I turn it this way, I will see a bit of that blue curling over, which is fine, which is what I want. Okay, the last bit is going to be here. Okay, so here's the corner of my collar to before this curve. I believe they're saying before the curve. Okay. Yes, to just before the curve. So again, I'm going to get my presser foot in here as far as I can. This is that top corner right here. I'll probably be starting my stitching right about there. And I'm going to come down to above that curve. So if I lay this down, I can see, okay, this is that curvy part. I want to stop while I'm still on the straight. And to me, it looks like right about here is where that curve is going to start, okay? So I have my pin in there so I know where to stop. I'm going to start here, stitching on the red side with all of my seam allowances pushed over here underneath my stitching from as far up as I can here to this point. And I'm going to do that on both sides. I thought I would move the camera over here for a second because this can get a little complicated. So right here is the first bit of understitching we did, where the seam allowances are going this way. Where my pin is, I need the seam allowances to be going that way. Okay, so underneath here you can kind of see they're over here and then they're over that way. Okay, but I'm looking at the outside of my garment as I'm sewing, and I'm wiggling my presser foot into that corner, opening everything up, making sure, I got my finger underneath there, making sure that the seam allowances are pressed over the right direction. And that's about as far back as that little foot. Well, that big foot, it's actually a pretty chunky little foot. And back tack just to hold it in place. And then with my thumb, I'm over here pushing those seam allowances over. And I go pretty slow. I would rather go slow and make sure that I have everything set right than whiz through it and have to pick it out. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pull that pin out. Over here while I'm sewing, I can still feel where that thickness is, so I know we're good. And right about there, I'm going to stop, back it up, call it good. So then I'm going to pull this out here. So this is the back. So see how seam allowances are pressed that way and then they're pressed that way? That's what I was talking about there. And on the right side, of course, I got threads all over the place. But now this is the seam allowance, or my understitching line from this top corner down to just above that curve. So when I go to press this part of the collar, it's going to want to curve under and give me a nice edge too, just like the top part is, okay? So that's how I did this one. I'm going to do the same thing to the opposite side. Okay, let me see if I can get you in a little bit closer here. This is my back, center back neck here, and I'm just going to get everything pinned into place because I'm going to be slip stitching this closed with a needle and thread. So basically here is my pressed under edge from before. I'm going to line it up with my seam line down there It's very thick right there. You know what? Before I do that, I am going to trim some of this fatness out of here. Okay. Alrighty, so now that feels slightly better. Slightly. I'm going to go ahead and pin this up. Then coming over here, I want to keep this everything lined up. So the seam allowances, remember, of the back neck of the red part are pressing up towards the collar. I'm covering all of that, but when I get to this point of my shoulder seam, I want the edge here to run along that shoulder seam. So I'm just going to stick a pin here and a pin here and one about halfway right here. Okay. So I'll do the same pinning on the other side over here. Okay, so now that I have it all pinned, I'm going to get a red thread and a needle and just whip stitch all of this down here to hold it together nicely. You might want to, before you start sewing, double check that you don't have anything folded over like that, like I just did. So getting that out of the way and coming back over. It would be very easy, as you can see, to get something extra pinned in there. So check the right side over here before you do stitching. So let me go ahead and get that done. I'll probably be calling that a night tonight on this project, and I will see you tomorrow. Okay, do we have voluminous for you? So it's the next day, and next day afternoon. I've been doing errands all morning. But I wanted to give you a quick look of what she's looking like, okay? My next step is going to be to put buttons down the front. There's 3 buttons here. It calls for 3/4 inch buttons. I actually have some really cool vintage buttons. They're slightly bigger, they're like 7/8, but I think that's fine. Now, to get into this dress, there is going to be a side invisible zipper. So don't close up both sides because you won't be able to get in. But before we can work on that and everything, I need to get these buttons on. So let me take you back to the table. I'll show you my buttons. I'm going to put them on with my 201 down here. Let me tip the camera down so you can see her. There she is. Okay, down here on my table, these are my buttons. I'm not too sure how old they are. They were in with some buttons that I know were from like the 1920s. It is a plastic. It's an early plastic, so who knows what their actual age. I don't know if you can tell. They're a little bit lacy, and they're just kind of fun. So on the black, they're going to show up like little polka dots. I actually have 5 of them. I only need 3 here. If I have 6 of them. I can add them somewhere else or just save them for another project. That is fine. And to get to their placement, if you look at the diagram, where are we? We are up here on step 14. Oh, I wanted to show you. Down here at the bottom, if you are doing the version with the detachable collar, I am not doing a detachable collar. I think my black facing gives it enough contrast without that. But if you are, step 13 is for you, okay? They're going to have you sew a half of the section of snaps along the back because that detachable collar gets snapped into place. I'm not going to worry about that, so just letting you know that's what that is. So over here, you can see that the buttonholes are going to be on this side, okay? So I just have that handy so I can remember which those are. And I have my pattern piece here, and actually if I move the rest of this, it'll be easier to see what I'm talking about here. I am going to go with their placement. So the first thing I'm going to do is punch out the little centers here of both sides of their buttonhole. Even though my buttonhole is going to be slightly longer, I'm still, oops, came untwisted here, I'm still using theirs so that I can get the right horizontal line placement. Now, I'm just going to use this to lay on top of it. The bottom should match up with my bottom, but I have a seam here, so I need to extend this 5/8 of an inch out. I am going to say that looks pretty good. You can get a ruler just to double check. And yes, and yes, they are 5/8 of an inch in, so that's great. So I'm going to draw. I'm on the right side of my fabric. 2 little dots here. Okay. And with that, I am going to go ahead and coming down this line, I want to make sure that they are about the right distance from the edge. And it looks like they are just over 5/8 of an inch from the edge, and that is fine. So I'm going to go ahead and mark this little mark there. And then come back and mark this, because that's what I need for my vintage buttonholer, is a starting point and a track, okay? So all of these marks will disappear when I iron it. Don't worry about that. Oops, drew that off center. Okay, so for each one of these, I have a starting point here and I have a track to follow. I'm going to go ahead, put some red thread onto my 201, pop my buttonholer on, and get those put on. So before I actually try it out on my garment, I did a test buttonhole on a scrap here, just to make sure everything is good. The thread is matching. Let's see if I can get a button through. Yes, this is a 13/16 inch cam, and on my real one, I'll clean it up a lot better. But if you've never seen these old-fashioned buttonholers, they make a really nice oval. I personally like them a whole lot better than usually the built-in buttonholes on the modern machines that do a bar tack up, bar tack, and down. These go all the way around. I like that. So anyway, I'm going to run over to the machine and put 3 of these on. I'll give you a quick look. Okay, so let me see if I can get you in here. Hopefully. This is it. Turning this crank at the back to get it to the beginning of its cycle. It looks about right. Let's kick these threads over to the side. And get my marks here. I'm going to start up here at the top. Where those 2 lines cross, I set my needle down. And this mark up here, I line up with that track line that I made and set it down. And let's just get going. Okay, and so I doubled around the back side where they would be the most pulling, you know. Lift it up. Move it down to the next spot, get everything adjusted, and do it again. So there you go. I've got them done, and I'm going to show you on the wrong side because up against the dark fabric, you can probably see it better, the oval shape that I'm talking about. Okay, so those are my buttonholes. I'm going to go ahead and press this again to erase my marks, and then go back to the table and cut them open. Okay, so I'm back here at the table. I have not cut them open yet because I'm just having a think. These buttons are not really going to be functional. They're always going to be buttoned because we're getting in and out of it by opening up a side zipper. So I am thinking that I might want to just permanently close them, basically not open up these buttonholes, just sew them together. I'm looking on here though, and I'm not seeing instructions for putting a zipper in. And I don't know where that went. So give me a minute. I want to look through this again and figure out where I've lost my mind, because it seems like we go from this point where we only sew one side of the bodice together to having the whole thing in. Oh, here. Insert invisible zipper into left side of opening, follow manufacturer's directions. Okay, so just to let you know, when we get to it, I will show you everything. But they are not telling you how to put the invisible zipper in. You have this, okay? If you're not familiar with how to put an invisible zipper in, watch me, we'll go through it. But also, I recommend having a generic sewing book, so that if you come across things like this and you're not, 100% sure of how to do it, you have something to reference to. Let me get it and I'll show you what I mean. So, this one is my favorite one. It's outrageously expensive, but it's my favorite one. But this is a Reader's Digest one. There's also a Singer one. There's a Simplicity one. There are a lot of different general sewing guides, okay? And inside of them, you should have a general information on how to do just about everything, including zippers. So I'm just flipping through and trying to see where they would have zippers. If I was wise, I would look in the index. Zippers. Okay, so they do have a section for zippers, lapped zippers. Honestly, a lap zipper would be good in this circumstances. Exposed zippers, centered zippers, all kinds of zippers with the diagrams to go along with it. So if you don't already have one and you're at a thrift store or something, or a used bookstore, and you find one, you can usually get one for just a few dollars. Grab one just to have in your sewing room. That will be handy. But we're not there yet. That will come at this point. So, but with all of that being said, I am not going to be cutting my buttonholes open. Okay, so I'm going to skip down to right now where I just lap them over each other and stitch across the bottom to lock them into place. So this part here, this dotted line on your pattern is center front. Those need to match up when we lap it over. If I measure from that line to the cut edge is 1 3/8 inches. So taking out for seam allowance, which is 5/8 of an inch, that's going to put my center front 3/4 of an inch from this edge right here, okay? So on this side that I just put my little buttonholes on, I'm just going to make a little line right there for center front. And then get my other side here also, which is not pressed as harshly, but it will still work. And make sure that's folded well and draw a line at that 3/4 of an inch place. No, you can't see me. I'm doing it right down here. Okay, so then if I put the one that does not have the buttonholes on the bottom, the one that does have the buttonholes on top of that, match up those little lines I just drew so the bottom edge matches up. That's where that needs to be. So I'm just going to put a couple little pins right here and run back over to my machine, and at somewhere between 1/4 inch and 3/8 inch seam allowance, I'm just going to put a little row of stitching going straight across right there. At this point down here, where I have it matched up correctly, I can feel where that bottom layer ends, all right, which is right here. So measuring from this folded edge all the way over here is at 1.5 inches. So coming up to where this buttonhole is, I'm going to put this edge at 1.5 inches, and I want to make sure that I feel that step down at the right point, okay? And I do, so I'm going to go ahead and stick a pin right there to hold that in place. go up to the next buttonhole, put my ruler at 1.5 inches, make sure I feel that step down at the right place, and I do. And I kind of placed it before, so I'm not that lucky. A little bit of pre-camera move there. And then finally up here at the top, yes, at 1.5 inches, I have that step down, okay? Skipping over, I'm going to flip this over so I have the right sides on the insides, the wrong sides out. And over here on this side, so what is that? It is the right side. It's on my left over here, but when you're wearing it, it will be your right side. This side I am going to stitch together, okay? And that's going to be at the regular 5/8 inch seam allowance, starting at the top all the way to the bottom. Seam allowance pressed open, we are ready to go. I need to set this aside for right now because I need to work on my skirt for a minute. So let me put this back over on my dress form and get my skirt pieces down here. Basically, you put the back together the same way as for the front. So I'm going to show you that just once and just understand what I do. I will double. This piece here, this piece number 5, is the skirt front and the skirt back, and I cut 2 of them out on a fold. Now, because they don't show it to you in the directions, but because of all of the trouble that this fabric has been giving me, before I do anything, I am going to take it over to my ironing board and fuse on my tricot tape up here at the top, just to keep this top section from wanting to stretch out of shape before I serge around it, before I do anything. So I've got 2 of these that are cut on a fold, my front and my back. I'm going to go do those so I can keep them straight. And then I have 4 of these side pieces, and I'm going to do the same thing. Just take them off here and fuse them. Now, the front, I don't know honestly if it makes a difference which side gets sewn together. They're the same length. Technically, the side that has 2 notches is the side that gets sewn to this piece, but I'm not going to worry about it. To me, it looks exactly the same. It looks symmetrical on both sides, so I'm just going to not worry about marking 2 notches and 1 notch at this point because it will fray. Trust me, it will fray. I'm just going to get that fused up there at the top. Okay, so as soon as I got that tape fused on the top, I went ahead, ran over to my serger and serged the outside edges. Because if there's anything this fabric wants to do more than stretch out of shape, it's unravel. So I just wanted to nip that in the bud. So this is one of my centerpieces, front or back, take your pick. And so I'm just laying it right side up, and I'm going to get one of these side pieces and attach one over on this side, pin it, stitch it at 5/8, 7 inch, and then press that seam allowance open. I'm going to do that over on this side and this side. And I'm going to do that twice. So I'm going to end up with 1 3-paneled piece for the front and 1 3-paneled piece for the back. Okay, so I've got my 2 big 3-panel skirts pieces put together, and they're just pinned over on my dress form. And I am thinking in the instructions, they tell you not to put the sleeve in until way down here in step 20. But I'm thinking I'm going to go ahead and put it in now. And this may end up getting a little bit interesting up here because since they don't actually tell you how to put the zipper in. But in general, on a side zipper, there's a notch right here. And in general, the zipper, this part is sewn closed, that top 2 inches, and then the zipper is in this space, okay? So what I'm thinking is if I go ahead on that side that is open on my bodice piece and just sew that top 2 inches closed, I will have 2 complete armholes that I can then set my sleeve into. And I would just rather work on that while it's a smaller garment, while it's just the bodice here and not the bodice with that big long skirt attached to it. So that's my plan. Since they aren't giving a whole lot of advice, I'm going to assume that it's a good idea. What I'm going to do is just hold this up here where this little notch in the pattern is right there. I'm going to stick a pin and go over to my sewing machine and just sew it closed from up this point to here at 5/8 of an inch, and then press that seam allowance open. Okay, so looking at my sleeve piece here, the side with 2 notches is the back, the side with 1 notch is the front. And like usual, so I don't lose track of it, I'm putting a letter B on this side, okay? Because they look very similar. Now I'm going to go ahead and draw in the center top position and the dot for my size here. I'm just going to kind of draw that over here and over here like that, okay? Take this pattern piece off, flip it upside down, and do the same thing on this side. So I have everything marked. And then I'm going to go over to my serger and serge all the way around both of these sleeves. I've serged it, and they want you to run gathering stitches between the notches. I did not actually mark the notches, I just marked the dots. So I'm going to come back and mark those. It looks like they're way down here where the curve gets started, so that's easy to remember. Just put them here. Okay. I am deciding that there shouldn't be a whole lot to gather. So instead of doing 2 rows of gathering stitches, I'm going to do that finger easing thing with the feet dogs in a 1 row of stitching across the top. I think that that will give me what I need to be able to make a nice sleeve cap. So I'll move the camera over to my purl machine and let you see how I do that. Okay, so let me see if I can move this light around so you can see. I just set my little presser foot on there. This finger here is going directly behind the presser foot. And I'm just doing a straight stitch. I'm going to run the edge of my fabric along this edge of my presser foot, which should be about 1/4 inch. And look back here, you see I am just bunching up all kinds of fabric back there. Okay, when it gets too much to hold, I'll let it go and start over again. Okay, keep going. Almost done. Okay, so I've made it all the way to the other notch. Pull this out. So that's working in enough ease now that if I hold this up, I can get my fingers in there like this. It's going to hold that sleeve cap in. It's just enough of a gather that it's going to form it so I can set it into that top. Okay, so let me get the other one done. Actually, while I am over here, let me tip you back down. Trying to figure out lighting is tricky sometimes. While I'm over here, after I get this put in, I'm going to go ahead, fold the edges together, making sure I do it 2 opposite ways so I end up 2 opposite sides. Stitch straight across here at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, press that open, and then I think I'm going to call it a night on this project. Okay, good morning and welcome to the next day. So the first thing I'm going to be doing is I've got my sleeve sewn together, seam allowance pressed open over here. Very little sleeve. I need to hem this. So because it's going to be just a little narrow hem, I don't want to deal with all of that seam allowance in there. So I am going to trim off up to, I'm going to call this about 1/2 inch, and then just under 1/8 of an inch I'm leaving here, okay? So I'm going to do that on both sides, which is going to make making a narrow hem a lot easier here. Okay. And then I'm gonna, basically if I turn it up about that 1/2 inch right there, then I can just tuck my little serged edge in and get that pinned, and that'll be a good start. Get this in here. This fabric wants to snag too. I have to be really careful putting pins in because it just wants to snag. It is a trying type of a fabric. Okay, so I'm going to turn this edge under, you know, about 1/4 inch or so, flip it up and pin it. And with just those 2 points, I should be able to just pop this out here and stick one in the middle right here. And that's going to be good enough for me to go over to my sewing machine. Okay, so then I'm just going to, on the machine, edge stitch it all the way around. And I actually already did that on this side. Let me find it. Okay, so here it is, and that's my little edge stitching to hold it in nicely. So let me get this one finished up. Okay, so I've got the hem put on here. And now I'm going to go ahead and get it sewn on. So this is my bodice, obviously. Lay it down this way. Here's the dart, that's the front. Okay, this is the back. Last night I sewed my other sleeve on when I was getting tired, and that is a bad idea. You should never sew when you're getting tired because that's when mistakes happen. Oh, wait a minute. I did not make a mistake. I don't even know. See, this is, I'm in that, I'm self-doubting. I am self-doubting. All right, so here's my right side. If I put this right side on top of it, as I would to sew it, and this is the back, then I have a little B here for the back. So I know that this is the right side for this sleeve. Yay. Always good when something good happens. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pin this, matching up that bottom seam, just so I can make sure that that is correct. And open this up here, looking at it from the wrong side. I got things to match up. First, I'm going to match the top mark where that top circle was with the shoulder seam up here. And I am going to pin it on each side so that no matter which way I'm looking when I'm sewing it, I can make sure that these seam allowances will lay nice and flat. Okay, then we've got a couple notches down here right where everything starts to curve. So I'm going to get those matched up. Right here is one. And over on the other side, again, right near where everything starts to swoop upwards, right here. Okay, and then we have a couple circles up at the top. So I have that marked right here on my sleeve. And remember, I put that edge ease stitching in, so I'm going to kind of form it in like that as I set it in. And that is matching up pretty well too. So thankful for that. I'm going to go ahead and get this dot point set in and see how it looks like it's too big, but I'm just going to set it in, smooth it out with my thumbs, rub that in there, and actually at the stitching line it is fitting pretty darn well, so that's good. And then I'm going to pin it at this dot location right here. Okay, let me put one more pin in at the midpoint here, and then I'm going to go over to my sewing machine and sew all the way around at a 5/8 inch seam allowance. And then after that, I'm going to come back and stitch a second row in just the lower section about 1/8 of an inch in. Let me show you on this one over here. So I have the main, oops, hang on a second, extra light. Okay, sorry about that. So here's my main stitching line here at 5/8 of an inch. If you can see, this is the top. But down here at the bottom, the underarm, I did a second row about 1/8 of an inch in, just between those two notches, okay? And then after I did that second row right here, then I came back and clipped a few places just at the bottom of this arm seam here, just so that it'll be more comfortable. Actually, I'm going to put one more over here towards the middle a bit. And I'm going up to about 1/8 of an inch of that second stitching line right there, okay? So that's how I'm going to go ahead and sew this side on. Let me get that done and I'll be right back. Okay, so at this point, I've got my bodice, I got my little sleeves sewn onto each side. This part is open over here. And I'm just going to set this aside for just a minute because I need to grab my skirt pieces. So I have two of these. There's a center panel, you can probably see it better this way, a center panel and two side panels. There's two of them. All right, so I'm going to need to sew my two skirt pieces together. So this is the side over here that I am going to sew. And I'm going to get my other piece, which is exactly the same, and lay it on top. Match up this side seam here. Okay, I'm going to pin that together, stitch it at 5/8 of an inch, and then press that seam allowance open. Okay, so this is the seam I just did, pressed it open, and that should line up with this side seam of the bodice that is sewn up all the way. So I'm going to go ahead and pin that together. Again, pinning both sides down. Okay, now we'll see how well this works. The seam lines for the darts should match up with the seam lines for the skirt panel. Should. We will see. So I'm just going to get this pinned here, move it over, pin it so this seam line from this dart matches up with that seam line where those two skirt panels come together. And then matching up the very edge. If it doesn't fit exactly, I'm going to try to ease things together to make them work as I do. So that looks pretty big right there. The center part looks like it's going to fit really well, so that's good. I'm going to go ahead and get that pinned together. Pin one more here and over here. Okay, now over here, that looks about as big as the front. So yeah, that's a lot of easing that's going to need to get worked in there. I'm just going to pin it at the halfway point, and we're going to deal with that when I get done with the back part here. So if I flip this over, this is the back of my skirt and the back of my bodice. Okay, you know what, I'm going to start just matching this outside edge here. Get those pinned together over here. And again, we have a back dart that should match up with the stitching line for the back skirt panel. Should. All right, so the center part again is matching up great here. And let me put one more pin here. Let's see what the side back pieces are looking like. Well, that's not bad at all. So my back is matching up really well. It's just my front that's not. And that's probably from those adjustments I made at the very beginning that we're just gonna work in. The good part about all of this is that I am going to be wearing a belt with it. hopefully, most of the time. And so if when I'm gathering all of this in, or easing it in, I should say, if there is a little bit of a pucker, it's going to be covered up with a belt, so that's good. Okay, I got it on. There are some puckers, but you know what? Hopefully my belt will cover that and life will go on, because at this point, this fabric that just continually wants to stretch and grow is really starting to annoy me. It doesn't say to on the instructions, but what I'm going to do is I have pressed my seam allowances from all of this up towards the bodice, and I'm actually going to come back and do another row of stitching, kind of like edge stitching right here, just above this seam line, and I'm going to be doing that going through the seam allowance and everything. That's going to hold it upwards where I want it to stay, plus it's going to be one more row of stitching because this fabric, it's so loosely woven and goofy that I don't want just one row of stitching holding this heavy skirt on. Anyhow, what I needed to do now is get ready to put in my zipper. Now this pattern calls for a 14-inch invisible zipper. And I went to look in my stash and I have really, really long invisible zippers, but I had a 14-inch zipper. It's not invisible, it's just a standard zipper. So instead of putting an invisible zipper in, I'm going to use this, put it in a standard way since they don't show instructions for an invisible zipper, you know. We're going to go for it. And because it's a standard zipper, I'm going to put it in slightly different than if it was invisible. So what I'm going to be doing is actually sewing up most of this side. I want to make sure that when I pin these together, that this seam line here at the waist is matching up exactly. Because if I don't, it's going to turn out wonky on my final garment. So I'm pinning that line together right there. And I've got this sewed down to 2 inches down, okay? I'm just going to go ahead and match this up. I can see where my stitching line there ends. Hopefully this big dart won't be a problem. I'm just going to get that pinned together here. Okay, so with that done, I need to measure down 14 inches from my opening up here. And this ruler does go down past 14 inches, so that's the spot. So if I put this here, it should be right about here. I'm going to get a pencil, or my heat erasable pen actually, and make a mark at that point. And I'm just going to hold it up here on my little chart to make sure, and yes, I marked it at 14 inches. Okay, so with this matched up here, then I'm going to come on down and match up this bottom edge down here. Okay, and get this all pinned. Okay, so I've got it pinned together. So what I'm going to do is from this point here, where this stitching ends, I'm going to use a long basting stitch from here at 5/8 of an inch all the way down to this mark. And at that mark, I have my pin set in the opposite way, just to remind me that that's where I need to change things. Okay, when you get over here, double check and make sure that both of the seam allowances on the front and back are both angled up. Okay, at this point, change your stitch length to a regular length, do a back stitch, lock that in, and then continue the rest of the way down. And then after that, come back and press this entire seam allowance open and flat. I just wanted to show you, I think things are looking up for me because I didn't even realize it before, but look, this is actually a zipper that is made for side seams. It has a little locking place at the top. Chances are you're using a zipper that does not have one of those, but what you're going to need to do before you do anything is up here in the tape area, kind of like where this is at the top of the teeth, get a needle and thread or whatever and just tack it together. You want to hold these two tapes together at the top so that when you zip it up, it's going to be nice and level, okay? So since I don't have to worry about that, I'm going to go ahead and get my double-sided water-soluble basting tape. Okay, so this is it, and I'm putting it on the front side of my zipper, the side that has the little tab on it. Okay, so I'm just going to run it down each side here. This is basically taking the place of basting by hand, and it does dissolve when you wash the garment. And I have never had a problem with it wanting to gum up my needles or anything, so that's the good part. The bad part is that it's difficult to get the paper backing pulled off sometimes, so just be aware and be patient. It will come off eventually. Okay, so I've got that side on. At this point, I'm leaving the paper on it until I'm ready to actually put it on here and clip this side. Okay, so there you go. That's my basting tape. Okay, so I have my seam pressed open. This point right here where I just drew a little mark, that's that top position where I started the basting, okay? And what I'm going to do is pull off one of the sides. Actually, I'm going to pull off both the paper from both of the sides just to get it sticky and ready to put down. Okay, so I've got the paper backing off. This is both sticky, and I have unzipped it, and I got it, the zipper down here. I'm going to flip it over and place this side first. And I can see the teeth. I want to place it so that my seam line is kind of centered in those exposed teeth. And I'm putting my little zipper stop at that point that I drew that line right here. Okay, I'm going to open this up just a bit so that as I am pushing it down, I can see where that seam line is, and just very carefully, slowly work my way down on this side. Okay, now that that side is placed, I'm going to zip the whole thing up, tucking my little zipper pull straight up in the air here, and making sure my seam allowance is pulled out nice and tight, starting in the center and pushing this side down. So, and then up here at the top, again, making sure my seam allowances are pulled out nice and tight. Okay. So, if you don't have the tape, what they would want you to do is open it, open it up and on the machine, baste that seam allowance, and then open this up, and on the machine, baste this seam allowance. This just kind of skips that step. And so I'm just running my fingers over it, making sure it's on there very securely. And now I'm going to flip it open so that I am looking at the right side. Okay, so this is the right side here, and it's going to be kind of a pain getting in there, but I am going to want to, I can kind of feel where everything is. I'm going to want to start stitching. I'm actually going to probably start up here and putting a zipper foot on, coming down this side. Let me go ahead and switch that foot out on my sewing machine, and I'll just show you how I do it. Okay, so I actually started my stitching up here, closer to the underarm seam, and when I came around where that little zipper flap is, I think my stitching line got a little bit further out, but at this point that's right in my armpit and nobody should be looking at it. I am using a just narrow foot, and so I'm only going, a couple inches at a time. I can feel where the seam line is. Under that seam line, I should be feeling the ridge where those zipper coils are. Okay, and then I'm going to go up a little bit, make sure that I'm feeling the zipper coils under the seam line where they should be. Okay, going over all those seam allowances is a bit thick. Coming down, like this. And I'm just taking my time making sure the zipper coils are where they should be. Okay? It's not a race. And when I get down to where I feel the bottom, then I will cut over. So. And here is the little metal part. I'm going to go actually just below that metal part, so right here. So I'm going to put my needle down, lift up my foot, rotate everything, put it back down, come across the seam line, maybe one more stitch, lift the foot, rotate everything again, put it back down and come back up just as carefully as when I went down. Okay, so I'll meet you at the top. Okay, so back here at my table again, and I want to show you on the inside. It all blends. I know it blends, but if you can see, here's my stitching that I did here and here. And even though I wasn't looking at this side, it is pretty darn even, I must say. So I'm feeling good about that. What I need to do is open up those basting stitches that was holding all of this together. So I'm going to start out up here at the top. Just pick a couple open where that little zipper pull is. So I just popped one thread. I'm going to pop a couple more here. Come on. Okay. Alrighty, so there's my zipper pull. I gotta pull a few more. Well, anyway, let me open up these basting stitches and get that zipper pulled down. Ooh, my camera is falling. Okay, so that is done. Here is my zipper. You know, it is fine for the purpose. Here's my waistline. It's matching up close enough for a fabric that does not want to behave, you know. And here is the little pull that hopefully can just, you know, lay down there and behave under my armpit. You know, I have decided I am going to go ahead and sew these buttons on. I just held it up in front of the mirror, and I think it's going to be plenty wide enough at the waistline and everything to be able to pull over my head when I have that side zipper open. So I have not cut these. Oh, that pin is missing. I have not cut these open yet. I'm just going to sew the buttons on over my sewn buttonholes, kind of towards this side, because that's where they would lay normally. So this is the width of my buttonhole. I'm actually going to be placing my button more on this side over here. All right, so I got my buttons on. I think they're looking really cute. The only thing we still have to do is hem up the bottom of this skirt. And I am just going to be putting a narrow hem down around the bottom. So just like I did with the sleeves, I am going to trim about the bottom ½ inch out of all of these seam allowances down here, like that, but on both sides at the seams of all of these panel pieces. And then I'm just going to make the same little ½ inch type rolled hem-ish type hem at the bottom, just like that. Just a simple little thing all the way around. Edge stitching it with my machine and then pressing it so it's going to lay nice and flat. Okay, all right, so it's done. If I had this to do over, I would do a mock-up of my bodice instead of just willy-nilly changing things. And I probably, ooh, I got a honeybee here. I probably have made a note of that already in the video. I don't know. Editing Marie will have to determine that later. And because of the changes that I made, I think that my top is slightly blousier than it would be normally, but honestly, that doesn't bother me. It makes it more comfortable to wear, so I'm good with that. It would be nice if it had pockets, but because it has a side zipper over here, right where that pocket would go, that is not going to happen. Go away, little honeybee. So even if I was going to put a side pocket in, I could only do it on one side, and that's not worth it to me. I like it just laying nice and smooth. So yeah, instead of the invisible zipper, putting the standard one in, I think is fine. This honeybee loves me. We have a lot of beehives, and I think she's just confused. Anyway, I hope you liked it. Definitely was an adventure, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Living my bucolic life, free up me city strife. Horses, chicks, and dogs, they are my neighbors. I cook and some spin, and move the horses in to the barn. Then time to move them out again. Red barns, green pastures, beautiful white houses. The view I see each day when I arise. This life pleases me, as it is plain to see. I'm living my bucolic life.